Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Lucidworks webinar on smart answers for employee and customer support after COVID-19. Thank you for joining today's webinar. My name is Max Charles, and I work in marketing here in Europe for Lucidworks. In today's webcast, our speakers will be diving into smart answers, technology that helps businesses serve their customers and employees by giving them fast answers to their products and support questions. Before we get started, let's go over some housekeeping. Please make sure your volume is turned up to hear the audio from today's presentation. If you have any questions during the presentation, we'd love to answer them in the Q&A session at the end. So please feel free to enter any questions you've got into the Q&A box on the console. Please also take a look at the resources box for links to learn more about smart answers on Lucidworks Fusion. Lastly, today's presentation will be recorded and the slides and recording will be shared with you after the webinar. Today's presenters are Radu Miklaus, Director of Product, AI and Cloud at Lucidworks, and Stephen Mearok, Senior Solutions Engineer. We'll start now with an introduction to smart answers by Radu. Over to you, Radu.
Thank you, Matt. Very excited to be with everybody today. We are in very interesting times, and with interesting and exciting times comes opportunity to start thinking about what we can change in general. On our side as a technology vendor, and also on your side as a provider of the search experience, it's a great time for us to start rethinking how we actually reshape the way customers interact with knowledge bases and simplify the experience. In many ways, we're put into a situation in which the customers and our employees are coming to that interaction point and expecting a simpler way to interact. And that simple way to interact basically is through very natural ways of asking questions, whether it's more colloquial or more formal, but expecting the same answers back in terms of what's curated by the company or the other side, if you will. So we will go through some of the current challenges and opportunities we're seeing in the market. We'll talk a little bit about the use cases and benefits. We'll talk a little bit about smart answer solutions from Lucidworks, and we also see a demo throughout that as well. So let's talk a little bit about the initiatives that are happening on the customer side related to conversations and conversational platforms. Gartner is actually one of the analyst facilities that have been tracking the activity in IT shops and CIOs related to ramping up projects around conversational platforms. And interestingly enough, the ramp up has been very significant. In 2018, about 21% of CIOs and IT shops were looking at setting up or setting up in short-term conversational platforms. And that number went up by almost 50% to 31% in 2019. So definitely the drive towards that conversational experience is there, and it's materializing into more and more companies. In addition, the use of AI is actually evident and needed to be able to enhance that experience. Keyword search is not enough anymore. And there's a plethora of methodologies on the deep learning side that can be applied to search in order to relate context of incoming queries to the search engine a lot better, and also retrieve the more relevant information back based on training experience with data that's already been curated. So in many ways, this can be applied to improving the experience, but also it's applied to actually putting a cap on the operational burden of sustaining that type of level of service. And that is done through increased use of AI and automation. If we are to talk a little bit about the phenomenon of COVID-19, which is, I'm sure, affecting everybody in the audience, the way they work, the way they prepare the experience for their customers, millions of employees now are working from home, and it's more critical than ever for companies to be able to communicate both internally and also externally with their customers, and give them an experience that allows the customers and employees to self-serve based on curated data. And that in many ways is starting to expose some of the weaknesses in the current information discovery and retrieval tools. Obviously, with more people going online, whether it's for consuming or also just being productive, there's an explosion of requests coming in, inbound requests, whether it's online support requests or interaction through chatbots or virtual assistants. And that is putting a tremendous amount of burden on the support structure of organizations, again, whether it's internal or external. So again, like I mentioned on the top of the call, extraordinary times is causing us to start to rethink the way information retrieval can be serviced. So, a lot of folks, when they think about conversational frameworks, their first thought goes to the interaction point. And the interaction point, a lot of times for conversational frameworks, is done through chatbots or virtual assistants. These are tremendous tools that have been actually progressing in sophistication quite rapidly, especially on the side of applying artificial intelligence around speech recognition, voice-to-text translation, etc., and also voice-to natural language processing generation. So if you get text back from the back end, how do you relate it in spoken language to a user? However, these systems do have some limitations because their focus may not be as strong on the context of the incoming queries and the relevancy of the responses back. They may tend to be rule-based or rule-driven and rule workflows. Sometimes being able to program domain knowledge into these workflows gets cumbersome because the permutations become almost impossible to replicate. And that makes them complex to integrate, complex to scale, especially if you don't have a very versatile backend that can handle contextual analysis and contextual retrieval. And I'm sure, some of you in the audience may have had themselves personal experience where, interacting with a conversational framework left them frustrated because of the lack of contextual understanding of the tool. And this is where this is the opportunity field that we're trying to meet with Smart Answers on Lucidworks Fusion. We are not a chatbot. We're not a virtual assistant. We are a backend that can integrate with chatbots and virtual assistants that is based on deep learning algorithms that enhance the way to analyze context of incoming queries and also retrieve the most appropriate and the most similar answer back to the audience. It is immediate, scalable, very fast, and enables the customers and the users to use that self-service approach of asking a question many different ways, extracting the context from the question, and then retrieving the answer back. This can be applied in many different ways, and we will go through some of those use cases here in a second. But you can imagine it can automate in many ways the way we respond to inbound queries. It can enhance the agent efficiencies if you have agents on the other side, like call centers. It can multiply the way employees use self-serve for information discovery and being more productive based on the knowledge bases that are already known and curated by companies. And in many ways, it replaces that experience of, if you're looking for certain information, having to click through or navigate complex FAQ trees to be able to get to the right answer. All you have to do is actually go to a point of interaction, whether it's a search bar or a chat box, put your question in and get the relevant answer back. So let's spend a little bit of time in talking about some of the use cases that we're seeing in the industry. And customer support is front and center for a lot of companies in current times. Obviously, as a lot of retailers and companies that are going straight to consumers are pushing more and more towards mobile and web, the call centers are seeing an increase in the volume of questions coming in. And the ability to automate and use AI for answering those first line of questions and still keeping the customer satisfaction, customer experience pretty high with the relevance is very important. And that can increase agent efficiency. It can create very robust self-service portals where chatbots are on the front end, and the automated interaction with chatbots can increase the resolution rate without necessarily blowing up the cost. And if you are thinking about the stages, if you will, of where this can be used for customer support, obviously deflection is one of the areas, but also triaging and prioritizing can be also an application of a smart question answer systems and enables agents to focus harder problems and actually focus on more immediate customer needs that may not be met into the knowledge bases that are available currently. Another use case that is very interesting, obviously, is e-commerce. And this talks to the consumer in each one of us, right? As providers of search, we also are consumers of search every time we go to a visual property in order to consume not only information but also products. And there's a lot of evidence that self-service answers at point of sale is going to increase the level of interactivity of customers with that particular site. And inadvertently, it's going to drive more click-through rates and down through the funnel, add to carts, and also conversion at the end. Easier product discovery obviously will improve the satisfaction with the site. And in many ways, once that's achieved, you can expect more consumption through average order values increases and also return visits as well. And finally, let's talk a little bit about the employee in all of us. Myself, I used to work in an office. Maybe some of you guys had the same experience, and I have to work remotely. My company has been, in a position to have to communicate a lot of very critical information around HR, travel, safety, and so on and so forth. And a great way to do that is actually to enable self-service portals for employees internally with these knowledge bases without having or forcing employees to go into a very complex drill down information retrieval effort. So personalized answers can offload in many ways the traditional inbound queries that are coming from employees related to, like I mentioned earlier, HR, travel, expense reporting, policies, etc. So in order to kind of show you that self-service experience, we will spend a few minutes showing you guys a customer support demo. And then after that, we'll return and talk a little bit more about the details of the solution underneath. With that, I'll pass it over to Steven, and we'll go from there. Steven?
Okay, thanks a lot, Raghu. The demo you're about to see is centered around customer care, which is all about how well we're able to take care of our customers as they engage with our brand. And this is everything from product research and discovery to support along through the renewal process of a particular product or service. So with the added intelligence from our deep learning models allowing us to answer questions, even when they're asked in a variety of different unanticipated ways, we can expand this customer experience and confidently introduce chatbots, virtual assistants that can handle natural language questions. So let's move on to the demo. And today we'll be looking at a fictitious company called DataBack. They specialize in backup and recovery solutions. And like many companies today, they were suffering from a poor search experience overloaded call centers, and an inflexible legacy search application. So we replatformed data back on Lucidworks Fusion and applied smart answers to their data. So let's see what a multi-channel customer experience looks like when powered by smart answers.
I'm going to move over to my desktop where I'll be screencasting my cell phone. So for this first demonstration, I'm going to take on the persona of an existing customer. Let's say that I'm troubleshooting an issue and I need a quick answer to a question. Hey Google, talk to DataBack.
Let's get the test version of DataBack. How may I help you?
What happens if the private analytics upload fails?
If the data upload fails, then the service will try to upload again after 60 minutes. Upload failures are reported in the dbd.log file.
And Smart Answers returned an accurate response back. Now let's say multiple users come along and they're looking for the same answer, but they ask the question in a variety of different ways. The upload isn't working for the analytics server.
If the data upload fails, then the service will try to upload again after 60 minutes.
And we'll try it with a different variation. What should I do if uploading to the analytics server is unsuccessful?
If the data upload fails, then the service will try to upload again after 60 minutes.
So as you can see, Smart Answers is actually capturing the semantic and contextual information of the different words and phrases that I'm using. So let's take a closer look at that, only this time we'll change a single word. Upload analytics server protected.
Security for your organization's private analytics reporting server is managed by the organization.
Now the word protected wasn't found anywhere inside of that answer, nor do we have any query rewriting or synonym replacement or synonym expansion happening in the background. So Smart Answers is actually able to encode that semantic similarity and automatically deliver the correct answer back to us. And this is due to Smart Answers' ability to encode text into deep vector representations, allowing us to have much greater synonym expansion without having to rely on things like stemming or uploading a large list ahead of time. Now, because Smart Answers is built on top of Fusion, we can take advantage of things like auto-tuning so that Fusion becomes smarter over time as more and more users interact with it. For example, a user might come along and ask, how can I speed up backups?
You can back up an entire instance more quickly by scheduling multiple child clients for simultaneous backup.
Now, this particular answer happens to be really great, but let's say, for example, that maybe it wasn't exactly what we're looking for, or it wasn't the most appropriate answer for this point in time. Our user can say, try again.
Schedule the DDB backup in such a way that it runs when there are fewer backups in progress as possible. This will ensure that the DDB backup will finish sooner. Was that better?
Perfect.
I'll let Fusion know you liked this answer the best.
Now, as a new user comes along and asks a similar question to that, they should receive that most recent response to their answer. How can I speed up backups?
Schedule the DDB backup in such a way that it runs when there are fewer backups in progress as possible. This will ensure that the DDB backup will finish sooner.
So let's continue down this journey, only this time I'm going to switch personas and I'm going to take on the persona of a future customer who might be wanting to do deeper level of research. And instead of a virtual assistant, I'm going to interface with a chatbot. So future prospective customer might ask, which feature releases do you support?
Feature releases, formerly service packs, are available in a 90-day cycle. We fully support customers on the 5 most recent feature releases.
Or perhaps instead of a future customer, maybe I'm an investor. I may ask a question along the lines of, does DataBack pay dividends?
No, DataBack currently does not issue cash dividends.
Now those 2 questions I asked were pretty simple. Let's make them a little bit more complex and remove some of the keywords out of them. Is there an annual return if I invest in DataBack?
No, DataBack currently does not issue cash dividends.
So here's a great example really showcasing the power of smart answers. I didn't use any of the keywords. I replaced them really with annual, return, invest, and smart answers understood the context and that there is a semantic closeness between my question and the answer that we have indexed. So to have a Q&A system that feels natural and has a high rate of accuracy, you really do need a lot of intelligence all working together behind the scenes. And with smart answers, we take a layered approach to achieving this. For example, we can incorporate things like entity recognition, parts of speech tagging to identify nouns and verbs within a query. And when we take all that additional information into account, we can create these really simple yet highly effective enhancements that make a conversation feel much more natural. To illustrate this, I'm going to move over to another web application, and I'll start typing some questions in the search box. What's a data cell group? And what's different here is instead of receiving a frequently asked question, I can return a glossary definition that's coming from an entirely different data source. But because we can understand the type of question that was asked, we could boost the most appropriate answer even if it lives in a different data source. So let's change that into something different. Who can read data in a data cell location? And smart answers identify that this wasn't related to a glossary definition necessarily. It was more closely semantically similar to a frequently asked question. So let's tie all of these concepts together, and I'll show you what a really fluid conversational experience might look like for a particular line of questioning. And for this, we'll go back to our chatbot. What's a client computer group?
A logical grouping of client computers in which selected options can apply to all member clients.
Why would I ever need to use a client computer group?
Once created, client computer groups can be used to perform the following tasks for all their members. Create scheduled tasks. Set user security. View job history. Generate reports.
And who can tell me more about that?
Aliyah Abed will likely know. She specializes in networking, client computer groups, and virtual machines.
So what's interesting is that I asked 3 different questions. The first one was related to a glossary term, the second one an FAQ, but let's look at this third one. And I'm going to put it in the search box in this case. So in addition to those first 2 data sources, we could also index data from Active Directory and then apply that line of questioning to a different data source, in this case one we have called people, and then boost this one up as the first most relevant answer. The other thing you might notice is in this particular question that I asked, I didn't include anything related to networking or client computer groups, but because of that natural language processing ability within Fusion and us having the ease to take advantage of it, we could identify that this particular question didn't include a noun, it didn't include a topic or an entity. So in cases like that, we can create a really simple rule that says, if you don't see any of those aforementioned items, just look at the previous question and use the context of that previous line of questioning.
Great. Thank you, Stephen. This is Radu again, and now we'll spend the next few minutes talking a little bit about the differentiators of the solution and also some of the deeper details on how we built it for your information. So in terms of smart answers, the way we actually approached the design of the solution was to embed deep learning on top of keyword search. And for that, we use robust machine learning techniques that include both word-to-vec type algorithms for cold starts and also neural nets for deep learning approaches for calculation of vectors. So these types of methodologies are not necessarily new in the industry, but the way they're used on top of a very robust keyword search engine will give you the type of experience that we just saw through the demo. We also have scalable enterprise search. And the way we're thinking about scalable enterprise search is not just about the fact that the engine scales architecturally, but also is the process scalable. So the way we build Fusion in general is around this concept of index and query pipelines, where users can actually go and use a low-code environment to build the logic behind how data gets ingested in the indexes and how the queries need to behave. And that in many ways, that process in many ways can save a lot of long-term burden of managing and scaling the backend system from a process perspective. Fusion is also API-first platform, so that makes it highly integrated, and the ability to integrate with chatbots and virtual assistants, what you just saw in the demo. So any type of conversational framework that is API-friendly can benefit from this very powerful backend. And finally, low-code model training. We know for a fact that data scientists and that intersection between data science and search is a very unique skill set. And this is why we've designed a low-code model training environment in which even search analysts without a lot of data science experience can go in and train their models and set up their pipelines without a lot of deep knowledge of deep learning and also data science in general. So that's a very big differentiator for us as a platform. I will spend a few minutes here on the lower process related to how we train the models, how we publish the models, and how we service the models directly at query time. So if I was to talk a little bit about training, we've designed training jobs that allow users to input training data sets that comprise of FAQs, which are Q&A pairs, or even just documents. And then we use either vectorized word-to-vec type algorithms or deep learning to calculate the vectors and build a model. And that's at training time. Once the model is built for calculating these vectors, that model gets outputted and stored into Fusion. From that point, the same model can be used at index time to calculate vectors for the incoming Q&A, but also at query time, where the magic happens around representing the incoming query as a vector and then calculating vector similarity between the already indexed question and answers. And finally, at production time, that query pipeline will be interacting with a chatbot or a search UI via APIs, where the user will input the query, and the query gets represented in a vector. It gets the similarity with the existing index question and answers gets calculated, and then the most appropriate answer will be sent back to the same mechanism. If I was to actually show the detail around the training jobs, which is the training part of the system, this is an example of the low-code experience environment that we talked about earlier. What you're seeing right here on the left-hand side is a menu of jobs that users can select under the classification of smart answers. So we have jobs for supervised training. We have cold start training examples when you don't have FAQs, but just have documents that you would like to train. And also jobs around evaluating the outputs of the training jobs themselves. And then as you select these types of jobs, the experience of low code, which is highly parameterized, will pop up, and you can fill in the terms around the input data, the methodology, the parameters, etc. If I was to talk a little bit about the pipelines where the models get used, we have two types of pipelines. We have index pipelines and query pipelines. And at indexing time, we have the deep encoding stage within the pipeline that will actually apply the model's vector calculation at index time. This is mostly applied to question and answers or documents. And then the query pipeline, which has a plethora of logic, including the ability to calculate, encode the vectors, and also calculate distances between query and documents, and build that similarity. And then finally, ranking the results based on the similarity between the query and the answer. At a more logical level, and this is the integration you've also seen in the demo, we have to talk a little bit about where the backend interacts with the front end. And the front ends are your conversational frameworks that will bring in things like voice-to-text translation that will communicate the user inputs back into the backend. Once the user inputs come into the backend, our question-answer system of smart answers will be again, calculating the vectors. We'll go and retrieve the existing answer vectors from the knowledge base, calculate that similarity, and then relate back the most relevant answer through the same mechanism into the user interaction point. What you've seen in the demo is actually an interesting integration that we built. It's just an example of many that can be done. We've used Dialogflow from Google. We have a partnership with Google as a company, so we use one of their chatbot frameworks. And the type of interactivity that you've seen and the way to configure it is in this link that points to our documentation, to our how-to documentation on how to configure this particular example. And this is not limiting to just Dialogflow. You can use it with Alexa or any other conversational frameworks that are API friendly and API open. With that, I will pass it over to Max, and he will talk a little bit about what are the ways to learn more.
Great, thanks, Radu. As we near the end of the webinar, thank you to everyone who's submitted questions already. If you haven't yet, but would like to, there is still time to do so. Before we get started with the Q&A, if you're interested to know more about the topic, please check out some of these links to additional resources to help you know more about smart answers. If you'd like to get in touch with us, you can send us a message at lucidworks.com/contact. I'll now hand it back over to Radu to get started with the first of the Q&A questions.
Thank you, Matt. I'll tackle one of the first questions, which is related to what industries we're seeing more interested in smart answers in general. And this is a very interesting one because, honestly, we're seeing this need across pretty much all industries and areas of application for information retrieval. What we have seen, though, is that there are certain industries that tend to have more formal knowledge bases curated beforehand, which smart answers can serve right away. And in general, financial services, healthcare, pharma, or government tend to be the type of institutions that have massive knowledge bases, massive FAQ environments that can reap the benefits of applying smart answers to right away, right out the gate. But as I said earlier, there's a wide variety of industries that will have these types of needs. Here's another one. What version of Fusion is Smart Answers available on? So Smart Answers is available on Fusion 5.1. This is a release that we had earlier in the spring. It's a release on our on our new refactored Fusion platform, which is cloud native and allows us to scale individual components very nicely, Smart Answers being one of them. So it helps us with that scalable backend that can support chatbots and virtual assistants.
And I see one here also, Radu.
You got one? Go ahead, Steve.
Sure. This is a good question. How can we start if we do not have documents to use in modeling? So Smart Answer ships with pre-trained models that can be used with our cold start solution. And what I like about this approach is that they're very easy to use, and they do a really great job of encoding the semantic and contextual information from your existing documents and incoming queries. In fact, for the demo that you saw today, we used a pre-trained model to encode and search with that semantic and contextual information with the data set we used.
Great. Thank you, Stephen. I'll just go through a couple more here. What NLP libraries are you guys using for modeling? So underneath the modeling for the deep learning modeling for FAQ training, we're using Python. And I think these are very popular libraries in general. And we're using a methodology around recurrent neural nets, RNNs. One of the things that makes the way we've implemented this a little bit more robust is the fact that we've added a lot of optimization around model serving. There's a lot of model technologies out there that can handle vectorization and embedding with high-level accuracy. However, some of the challenges in the industry is when those are applied in sub-second, millisecond response, which is needed for query response. That's where the optimization and Smart Answers comes in very handy, because we can give that model serving experience and optimize it at millisecond response. How will the system get better? This is interesting. So in the way we're actually tackling the problem, and this is something that Stephen brought up earlier, we have this concept of cold start, and we have pre-trained models, but we also have the ability to take in your current knowledge base documents without them having to rate it as FAQs, train them, and then deploy a model based on that. Now, as users will come in and interact with Smart Answers, they will be clicking on what they consider relevant answers coming back from the question and the query. And that, in essence, becomes a signal for us. A signal basically means a user activity that can trigger relevance of an answer for us. And in essence, what that becomes between the query and the click, that becomes a Q&A pair, which can be considered an FAQ. And as you take that data back, that becomes a great candidate for retraining using deep learning now, since we have Q&A pairs and we can actually refine the system going forward. And this is if you think about this, as you collect more signals, the training data set gets more robust, and the model gets more robust as a function of that as we continue to iterate through the training. I think this was the last question. We would, again, welcome you guys to visit our website and our documentation on a lot of these details. This will be also recorded, as Max mentioned earlier, and provided to you as collateral later. We appreciate the time you spent with us today, and we hope to see you guys out there. Thank you so much. Stay safe.
Great. Thank you very much, Radu and Steve, for presenting today. Really good set of presentations. So all the content will be emailed to you after the webinar. Please feel free to forward it on to your colleagues. And just to remind you, if you do want to get in touch with us, you can contact us at lucidworks.com/contact. Thanks again for joining, and we hope you enjoy the rest of your day.